Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Kansas City Cast. Today we are going to talk about all the misconceptions about Kansas City. But first, my name is Micah. This is my twin brother Mason, our good friend Jared. We work together. We sell real estate here in Kansas City. We're all born and raised here. And bottom line, we love the city and we love being able to share that with others. And so today we're going to talk all about misconceptions in Kansas City. But before we do that, we always like to kick off each episode with our spot of the week. This is somewhere in Kansas City we think you should check out, and Jared's going to tell us about that today.
Yeah, so today our spot of the week is a newer place. It's called Deviant Kava. It's on Main Street in Parkville, which, if you've listened to an episode before, we love Parkville. It's a great place to be. But Deviant Kava, if you're not familiar with what kava is, it's a plant. It's some kind of pepper family plant. Don't know exactly the details of that. Not a horticulturist, sorry. But it gets made into a drink that I guess is supposed to have some relaxation qualities to it.
Huh.
But the reason I like Deviant Kava, one, haven't had the kava yet. I will eventually. But more importantly, the atmosphere there is just amazing. It's an old house that's been converted into a shop. They serve espresso drinks as well. And it's just such a cool vibe. And on weekends, they're open late, open till 10 p.m., Friday, Saturday, maybe Thursday in there too. But it's a really cool spot. Have you guys been yet?
No, I haven't
I
been.
have not been. Do they mix the kava with something, or do you just drink it straight?
I think they make a drink like directly out of the kava plant. I think there's flavors and stuff too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like if you don't do black coffee, similar to like how you
Yeah,
could mix in
yeah,
other
syrup or
stuff
something,
or
yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Interesting.
To make it I wonder what it tastes like. Now I'm really intrigued. I don't like coffee, so maybe kava's
Maybe
like
this will be
kava's
the
the thing.
thing.
maybe
Yeah.
that's the thing. Yeah. So if you're not a coffee person, maybe try kava, I guess.
Yeah.
Are there other kava places in Kansas City?
I've never seen a kava place. I bet it exists, maybe not in Kansas City, maybe somewhere else in Kansas City. I don't know.
Sure.
Never seen it myself. But one thing that really drew me to it, so I went for the first time with a friend, and their like specialty drink menu. So I worked in coffee forever. I've seen all the flavor combinations that people love, whatever.
Nothing new for
but
you.
I walked in, read the special menu, and I was like, they're doing something different here. And I was actually really impressed when the uniqueness was actually really good. Sometimes the unique stuff's not all
Just
that great.
unique for the sake of
Yeah.
being
Right.
different.
But no, so they
What was one unique thing that you?
yeah, so they
really
have
liked?
so the drinks that I've tried there that I've really enjoyed outside of just like normal espresso kind of stuff. They had one called the Florida Man, and it's like a citrusy orange espresso based drink.
Huh.
Really, really good.
Ooh.
Really liked that one. The friend I visited with the first time was from Florida, so that was like he had to try it, and it was great. It was actually really good.
I've heard really good things about orange flavoring in coffees, and I've never had it myself, but I hear that is a top tier combo.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was really great. And then the other one that I had recently was called the Samoan Hotspot. So it's like a kind of like a mocha that's a little bit spicy. Really, really good. Probably not your cup of tea. You don't really like spicy.
That's true.
Fair enough. But I thought it was really good. Like I said, I'm kind of hard to impress when it comes to like unique coffee stuff, and I was very impressed with both of those drinks.
That's
Okay.
awesome. Well, downtown Parkville's cool too. So even if you go and try something you don't love, at least you can spend
You're right there.
some time in downtown Parkville and
Yeah,
enjoy that.
the renovation on the house to make into the coffee shop was amazing. I don't know who did it, but it's top tier.
Those houses on Main Street are incredible, but then it's so cool to see some of those, be kind of turned into businesses, which is great.
Yep, and they have a great patio outside as well. So some cool places to check out.
Yeah, catch a nice day.
Definitely.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you guys want to dive into misconceptions in Kansas City?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. First one is that Kansas City is just one big city. There's this sort of urban sprawl effect that it's all one giant thing. How do you feel about that?
So I get that. I think. I mean, Kansas City is a confusing city. Like it just is. There's no way around it.
Yep.
Right? Because you think about like if I live in the Northland, what does that even mean, right? But if you think about even like further, like if I explain to somebody, so from my house to our office, which is about a 10, 15-minute drive, depending on which route I take,
Yep.
right? If I drive down kind of one of the main roads, I drive through Kansas City because I live in Kansas City. As I'm going south towards downtown, I'll also pass through Gladstone. Then I'll pass through Oakview.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll go back into Gladstone and then back into Kansas City to get to our office that's in Gladstone.
Uh-huh.
Like it doesn't make sense.
I was talking to somebody I met yesterday who was in town from Texas looking to buy here, and he was talking about all the different parts of the city that they had been looking in. And I told him that. I said, Kansas City, especially compared to a lot of other major metros, is super confusing because you're not always just in Kansas City. Like when you go to a place like Chicago, it's like I'm in Chicago.
Yep.
And Kansas City just doesn't work that way. Like he was talking about how we got to the particular house that we were in. And I was like, yeah, you pass through 3 or 4 different cities
Mm-hmm.
to get to where you are in the house. He was asking, is this a Gladstone address versus a Kansas City address? And this particular house was a Kansas City address. And so we talked all about just the differences there and how Kansas City's laid out and how it can be really confusing, even if you're from here.
Well, that's a confusing part, I think, because you have so much. It's not as though you have these pockets that are like this city next to this city. They're sort of all intermingled, especially
Yeah.
Kansas City specifically, because when you think Kansas City, if you're not from here, you think downtown. You're thinking about that, classic shot of like Union Station and all the buildings and all
Yep.
that from Liberty Memorial. That is Kansas City, and then as you go north of the river. There's a whole bunch of pockets that are legitimately Kansas City, but interspersed in between those are other municipalities. So you might pass from one to the next without actually even realizing it, which is how you get confusing terms like the Northland. Because how do you describe the difference between Kansas City, like you think of it downtown, versus Kansas City, that's the same city, just north of the river, and in those kind of different pockets? Because you have to come up with this sort of giant catch-all term because there's so much intermingling between the cities as you get up that way.
Yeah, and then you throw on top of that something like, well, KCK is across the river.
Uh-huh.
Also Kansas City,
Uh-huh.
but Kansas versus Missouri.
Yep.
That's
And a
super
completely
confusing too.
different city to Kansas City, Missouri, like different government, different taxes, all of that. So it's some people think even those are, it's just, the Kansas version, or somehow they're the same and spilled out onto the, other side of the state line. It's it can be really challenging to keep track.
Very, very much so. And then, the thing that as we help people move here, they're often thrown off by like, well, you can be in a certain school district, but still be in Kansas City because the cities, as they overlap, there's different school districts that are involved.
You're right.
and things like that are really confusing. And also, Kansas Cityans, we use terms interchangeably, right? So like, well, Waldo and Brookside are part of Kansas City, but they're neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
They're kind of less distinct areas, but they're also part of Kansas City proper. So
Yeah.
it's super confusing.
Yeah.
It really is. I think one of the areas we see it a lot is the Gladstone, Kansas City.
Mhm.
Those lines are sort
So
of
blurry.
really blurry at times, and so
I'm from here, and a lot of times, like if you stopped me on a particular street and asked me where I was, I may not be able to tell you.
That's fair.
you also see it like in from like the postal service's perspective, like when you get mail, like your address sometimes will say Kansas City even though you are in Gladstone. And so you run into that a lot where it will come up both ways. Like for our office, for example, if I search it, Kansas City or Gladstone, the same place comes up regardless of what city you put in there. That's how confusing that can be. And so my general rule of thumb when we work with buyers or looking in this area is who are you going to pay your utilities to, right? Is it the city of Kansas City or is it somebody else? And that usually is kind of a good way to clarify one way or the other. Where exactly am I right now?
Yeah. Confession time. Actually, no, our office is actually in Gladstone until there was a small fire on the air conditioning unit and the Gladstone Fire Department.
And you
showed up.
see which fire department shows up. That's awesome.
I guess that's another way to tell where you are.
It is not the way you'd want to
Not
find
the way
out. It helps for sure.
The other thing that can be so important when it comes to where you're located, especially here in Kansas City, because of the earnings tax, is if you are located in the actual city of Kansas City, if you live or work in Kansas City, you pay that earnings tax. So living, depending on where you work, if you work in Kansas City, there's really no getting around it. But if you don't happen to work in the city of Kansas City proper, living in one of those kind of smaller municipalities, North Kansas City, Gladstone, Parkville, can help save you on the earnings tax, which can be a significant savings depending on what your salary looks like.
For sure. Yeah, definitely not a small thing to think about.
No.
Right.
And it makes it, all that more important when you're looking for homes to make sure you know exactly where you are, if that's a goal of yours.
For sure. I mean, there's all sorts of things we could talk about too when you think about like if you're on the Platte County side, for instance, right? Like there's a section of unincorporated Platte County that's all within the city limits of Kansas City.
Yeah.
Which makes zero sense.
I have a house there that we lived in for a little while. It's a rental property now, but it's the same way. Yeah, it's a Kansas City address,
Mhm.
but like from a utility perspective, it's not the city of Kansas City.
Yep.
We are very much a carve out.
Yep.
We have a buyer we're under contract on right now that's the same way. It's unincorporated Platte County, and yet it's
very
Kansas
strange.
City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super strange. Our next point here, maybe a misnomer of Kansas City, is that Kansas City is a boring place to live or there's nothing to do here. Which, I mean, if you've listened to the podcast at all before, like you know is not true. Or maybe you disagree with us
Right.
about all the fun things we like about Kansas City. And if so, let us know because we'd love to have you on and chat about why you think we're wrong. Would love to hear that. But more importantly, I think Kansas City has a ton of things to do, right?
Yeah, they really do. And it's, it's grown so much over the last,
Mhm.
decade and a half.
Yeah.
It's so cool to see all the development. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about before the world-class museums when it comes to the Nelson Atkins Museum, the Liberty Memorial and World War I Museum. Fantastic that's right here. And you miss that if you just assume that there's nothing here to do.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want a mountain or a beach, like we have it all here in Kansas City,
Yeah.
right? Don't have an NBA team yet.
Yeah.
Right.
That'd
Or an
be fun.
NHL team. Both of those would be
Less
cool.
intrigued by that one.
Yeah.
but-
I think it'd be fun.
It'd be fun.
We got the minor league team, but yeah.
But I mean, I just think like what I always tell my clients who are moving here maybe for work or something, not super familiar with the city, is like, I feel like Kansas City, we get most of the benefits of a big city without most of the hassle.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a net positive.
When you look at just the traffic that typically comes with a bigger city, the one thing we're lacking in we talked about this before is on the public transportation side. I think obviously we mentioned just the growth we've seen in the city overall, and I think as we continue to see that, we'll see the infrastructure be built out to help support that as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I was down near downtown on Saturday and spent some time down at River Market, and then I hopped on the streetcar, and it was the first time I realized because that expansion had just opened.
Yeah.
to
I
get you
haven't been
all the
on
way
it
to the
since the
plaza.
expansion.
I didn't have time, but I really wanted to just ride it all the way as far south as it would let me, and check out those new stops and see the expansion. But it is so cool to see how that's growing, and it connects those areas. So you can be, on a Saturday, spend some time at City Market, and do the farmers market thing there in the morning, and then take the streetcar all the way down to the Country Club Plaza and do some shopping, grab some lunch, all of that, and never have to actually get in a car to go do those things, which is really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, for people visiting Kansas City, right? Like you hop an Uber or something from the airport down to downtown River
Mhm.
Market, wherever.
Yep.
Your
You have a
might
hotel
be.
near there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you could really experience most of Kansas City without ever having a car.
You
Yeah.
can. Yeah. Hit Power and Light. All of that's right there. Union Station, you can walk around. Crown Center's there. All those sort of classic Kansas City spots
Mhm.
you can hit right from that main route.
Yeah. Super fun.
All right. The next big misconception I think that a lot of people have is that tornado season is terrifying, especially if you're not from here, not used to that.
I definitely get the idea behind that, especially with how tornadoes are portrayed in movies. Obviously, the classics, Twister. You've got The Wizard of Oz that comes to mind, especially now with the new Wicked getting ready to come out. But yeah, you definitely see, if you're not from here, tornadoes seem like, how often do they happen? What kind of, obviously see like the pictures and videos after a tornado comes through, the damage they do. But honestly, growing up, living in Kansas City, they're not terribly common. Obviously, I mean, gosh, every year we'll get maybe 2 or 3 times where the sirens will go off. But for the most part, we haven't had like a crazy earth-shattering tornado actually come through in a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, there was one in Gladstone a few years ago, but I think at the end of the day, most people who grew up here never really experienced a tornado. I mean,
Yeah.
we know people maybe who've been affected by things here
Yeah.
and there, and it's devastating for them.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the sirens go off. We all go outside and look up at the sky instead of going to the
Yep.
basement like we're supposed to, and then it passes through and
Right.
we're okay.
And we are in Tornado Alley, but I think there are places obviously around the country that just get hit a little harder. I'm
For
talking
sure.
to friends in Oklahoma, and
Mhm.
they've got like the kind of big shelters that are built out like just kind of publicly. So if you're out and about and
Oh, wow.
you need to go pull over and go take shelter somewhere, you can do that. So I think our location, yes, we're considered in Tornado Alley, but we don't get quite as many tornadoes as maybe other parts of the country do.
Yeah, it's so, and maybe if you're not from Kansas City, maybe you don't think it's terrifying because you see all the memes everywhere of like the classic Midwestern, the guy on the porch
Sure.
and the tornado's like right there and he's just hanging out. Like if that's your perception of how we handle things, most people, are a little bit safer than that. But that is definitely a thing where you're, you got the weather channel on your phone and you're on your front porch looking up at the sky and listening to the sirens, just kind of looking around and waiting. And the reality is, yeah, we don't get too many scares that actually materialize in anything. But it is something to be aware about. It's one of those things I think that you might be more freaked out about kind of coming in and then you realize, hey, this actually isn't as big of a deal. I would take tornadoes over hurricanes, I think.
Oh, for sure. At least a hurricane, like you kind of know it's coming.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, you
there's
get a little
warning.
more
And
advanced.
tornadoes, like we have some kind of warning. It's usually minutes, not days like a hurricane, right? But at least we have some kind of warning. I always think, like my friends from California will talk about how terrifying tornadoes are. And I think like you literally live in a place where the ground shakes. Like
Yeah,
that's far more terrifying.
with zero
Tornadoes. Yeah, with
zero
zero
warning.
And it creates some really fun memories. We were at a Cracker Barrel one time and the sirens started going off and it was like they just had everybody go into like the kitchen and hang out. It was like, okay, now we're in the kitchen of a Cracker Barrel. So those fun things that you never thought you'd get to do.
Yeah, usually in the summer we set up a little, like sofa or mattress in the basement, and if the sirens go off, the kids get scared, so we take them down the basement and they'll fall back asleep in the basement. They think it's super fun.
Yeah.
So,
Sleepover.
Yeah,
Super fun.
Another misconception that some people may have is that people here are more kind of fake nice. Like you hear that kind of Midwest nice term kind of thrown around. And then the question always comes to mind, especially if you're not from here, how genuine is that? What do you guys think?
I mean, I think Midwest nice is really a thing, right? Like when I think of like fake nice, I think more of like Deep South.
Yeah,
right?
the Southern hospitality.
Yeah,
kind of
where
thing.
somebody will be like, "Oh, bless your heart," and that's not a good thing when they say that.
Right. Sure.
So I always think like Midwest nice is actually a thing. Like somebody talks to you in the Midwest, especially in Kansas City, like I think they genuinely mean it and they care about why you're here, or why you're in front of them, or whatever the situation may be.
Yeah.
I think people are generally, and this is definitely not the way in lots of parts of the country, people are generally like willing to engage with you when you're out in public.
Yeah.
Like you're at a grocery store, or you're at the gym, or you hold the door for somebody, whatever. People are generally open to conversation with a stranger. And I think it helps the community feel a lot more connected. And I think you miss that in some places where it's very much just sort of head down. I'm going to kind of do my thing and go on. And, don't be, if you're not a person that wants to engage with people, strangers in public, people aren't going to push that on you
Yeah, for
necessarily.
sure.
But it is, if you like that and you're open to that, it's semi-easy, I think, to find people who are kind of like that too and want to share that same kind of level of connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super common to like be walking into a store or a restaurant or something, and somebody holds the door for you, and you just say thank you, and you say hi or whatever, and
Yeah.
kind of move on with your day. But I think a lot of places that's not normal. People kind of look at you funny when you hold the door for them on the West Coast or something.
Yeah. You see people out in Chiefs gear and you start, strike a conversation about, just, hey, go Chiefs. And then that turns into a little conversation. So just, again, I think that Kansas City community kind of spills over into some of those random encounters you can have with strangers, which is fun.
For sure. I think maybe one of the places this is most evident, and this is kind of a strange example maybe, but if you're traveling in another part of the country
Mm-hmm.
and you see somebody in a Kansas City shirt, 100% of the time I'm going to talk to them.
Yep, I agree.
My wife doesn't love it, but hey, I'm going to do it. And I've had some really good conversations with people who are either from Kansas City, who are living somewhere else now. I think we were in San Diego a few years ago and we were on like one of the piers or whatever. And there's a lady wearing a Kansas City Chiefs shirt. And I was like, hey, Kansas City. She was a transplant. She grew up in Kansas City, lived in California now. And we had a nice little, couple-minute conversation about how great Kansas City is and how we were enjoying our time in San Diego. And I mean, I think people kind of thought it was kind of strange, but cool.
I always love when we travel, like if I'm in an airport or we've done that if we get on cruise ships, anywhere where you're going to be like with a whole bunch of people from other places, I'll throw on a Kansas City shirt just because I want that interaction. Like
I do it just for the conversation starter.
Yeah.
Because I know people that are from here will do that if they see me in a Chiefs shirt or even just one of the kind of general Kansas City shirts. So
it's also fun when you get the people that aren't from here that are maybe a fan of another team that want to, kind of talk trash on you because you're wearing the Kansas City stuff. So it's fun. I wouldn't wear it if I flew through Philly recently, right? In the near future. But other than that, we'll wear it.
I think maybe our last misconception of Kansas City, and this one's actually kind of fun, especially if you go back and listen to our conversation with Jesse Smith, mayor of North Kansas City, who does not fit this one. But the myth is that everybody who lives here is actually just from here. Like nobody just leaves. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like you grew up here, you don't leave, and that's where we get Kansas Cityans. And that's for sure not true.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, just you look at the growth. One, I mean, there's huge companies that are headquartered here, and so all of the time you're bringing in all kinds of employees, people from all over the country to come work and live here in Kansas City, which is really cool. Oracle, which used to be Cerner's here, T-Mobile, I think, is still here, and of course we've got. Used to be Sprint, and
yep.
T-Mobile bought them, so all kinds of big companies. They're building some big data centers out here. Google and Meta both are. So all kinds of employment opportunities. People coming from other places in the country to live and work here in Kansas City.
I think that's something we saw a lot through COVID, right? As everybody kind of moved to remote jobs, they realized I can do the same job I'm doing, but live in a city that has a much lower cost of living. And so we saw just a great influx of people coming here just for the flexibility of, like we mentioned before, we've got a lot of the amenities of the bigger cities around the US without the price tag that a lot of those cities carry. So it brought in a ton of people that aren't originally from here that have kind of since then planted here and just can set up at a coffee shop and work from wherever.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that we're in the middle of the country, so we have a lot of like federal government jobs here as well. That people get here.
Absolutely.
And we also, like, in terms of like bigger cities in the Midwest, we're kind of we're not the biggest. You know, St. Louis is probably a little bit bigger than us, and you know, if you go west, Denver, which I wouldn't necessarily consider Midwest, but we get a lot of people moving from Omaha and Des Moines and Arkansas, you know, to come here because it's kind of like the next biggest city to all those places. So I mean, I know a ton of people from Arkansas who've moved to Kansas City because it was, you know, it was a little bit bigger than when they're from.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like even just education opportunities here too, right? Like
Yeah.
UMKC is here. The med programs, obviously a really big thing there. And so
I believe it's one of the only 6-year med programs, right, in the country.
Yeah, I think so.
Which I know that brings in a ton of people.
Yep, you get a ton of people there. We just met with a guy the other day who's looking to buy a place for his daughter as she goes through med school here in Kansas City. So they're not from here, but they want to buy a place so she can kind of plant here for a little while. And so
they're actually from St. Louis.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. So, and St. Louis has some cool opportunities as well. But I think it's so cool to see how those things. You know, Midwestern Seminary is another one that's here in Kansas City, and so you get a lot of people,
a lot of trade slates
coming from other places in the country to study there. And so it's cool to see all the different things that bring people here.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked a lot about people moving for work, but I mean, we kind of touch on. I think there's a lot of other reasons people just come here because it's a cool place. Like, it's a lot of fun things to do in Kansas City, as we've talked about ad nauseum on the podcast in the past, right?
Right.
But I think more and more, you know, I meet new people, and you know, they came here for some reason, and they choose to stay here, even if that reason they originally came changed, right?
I think that's a really good point.
Maybe they came for work at some point, but they've chosen to stay here because it's such a great place to live.
Yeah, I'll meet people often where they'll say, we came here we had family near here or whatever. We wanted to be close to family. And that was kind of what brought them to Kansas. Like, Kansas City probably wouldn't have been their first choice if they were rolling out a map and saying, where do we want to live? There was a different kind of something else that pulled them here. But then, they fall in love with the city, and they really do sort of build a life here. And this really begins to feel like home over time.
Yeah, which I think just speaks again to like the charm of Kansas City, the opportunities we have for things. I mean, the culture here is just really fun.
Yeah. All of this said from people who were, born and raised here.
But we are the people that never left.
we are the stereotype.
There are still some of us that are, for sure. That's okay. We'll be the stereotype.
That's right. And I think that also speaks to how great it is that a lot of people do live here and stay here because it is a great place to live.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our misconceptions, but we always like to wrap up each episode with our Kansas City hot take.
Yeah, a hot take for this week, and I know we already kind of mentioned it a couple times in this episode, talked a little bit about St. Louis, and our hot take for this week is St. Louis is the better kind of larger city in Missouri. When you think of Missouri, you're really kind of anchored on both sides of the states with larger cities, Kansas City and then St. Louis. What do you guys feel? How do you guys feel about that? I know obviously we're a little biased.
Yeah.
Born and raised in Kansas City. What are your thoughts on St. Louis?
Okay, take us there.
I mean, so I did my undergrad at Mizzou, so I know a lot of people from St. Louis.
Sure.
And St. Louis is not a bad city. It's a great place to go spend the weekend, lots of fun things to do.
Yeah.
But it's just not a fun city to be in for a long period of time, I don't think. Like, I've spent a fair amount of time in St. Louis. It's all super spread out. Like, nobody who says they're from St. Louis is actually from St. Louis. If you say you're from St. Louis, it means like which suburb are you from?
Uh-huh.
Whereas when I say I'm from Kansas City, like my address has been Kansas
Is
City
Kansas
for most
City.
of my life. It literally is a Kansas City address. So I think there's that element, and then I think there's a lot of influences in St. Louis that I think just make it not quite as fun, not quite as nice. Like the culture is a little bit different there. People aren't nearly as engaging, I don't think, as they are in Kansas City. It has kind of a weird Southern vibe to it that
Sure.
isn't not true Southern, but kind of a little bit of that flavor to it, which is a little strange. It has a large Catholic influence, which is not a bad thing by any means. But having been settled by the French originally, there's still like kind of that, element to their culture that is a little weird sometimes. So it's just a strange place. I don't think it's that great.
I also think, correct me if I'm wrong, they have a pretty robust public transportation system, right, with the trains and all that.
I think it's okay. I think it's probably better than Kansas City's, but not.
Well, yeah, I say robust in comparison to Kansas City. I'm not going to put them on the same level as a city like Chicago or New York or anything like that. So I mean that is a plus. I mean we spent some time there, and we didn't rent a car, and so it was just we kind of used that to get around. That was helpful. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of St. Louis style pizza. I know that's that might be a controversial take, but why
that's another hot take right there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure. Ultimately, I think that Kansas City has done such a good job over the last, and we talked about this a little before, but a couple of decades really investing in the city and the infrastructure. And talk about areas like our downtown area.
The downtown specifically is one that comes to mind.
Has just exploded.
It used to be, I mean, you couldn't, or it's not couldn't, you maybe wouldn't choose to walk downtown late at night. And now in Kansas City, because of all the growth in the infrastructure that's there, you really feel, there's all the city.
Yeah,
you feel pretty great about what kind of walking around late at night, and there's a lot going on.
There's just, you think about like areas like Power and Light.
Yeah.
Even our Union Station, because I know St. Louis has one, and it was meant to be more like a mall thing, I think.
Yeah.
Didn't really quite maybe pan out like they hoped. So I don't know. I just think about things like that our Union Station is such an iconic, it is Kansas City when you think about it, and just being there.
That is one thing. That's a good point. What I do envy St. Louis on a little bit is the Arch. They have that iconic, no matter where you are in the country, somebody says St. Louis, you're thinking of the
one
Arch.
thing you think of.
I do feel like for us growing up here, and obviously as Kansas City gets put on the map a little bit more, that image of kind of Union Station, the downtown skyline is kind of synonymous with what people think of when they think of Kansas City. Before that image really kind of started getting around the internet a little bit more as the sport teams have had more success. That's where we do all of our parades.
That's right.
There wasn't that kind of like defining thing of like what Kansas City has. And so I do envy St. Louis in that regard of no matter where you're from, you think of St. Louis, you think of the Arch.
And if you tell somebody that you're from St. Louis, nobody assumes you're from Kansas.
That is
Everybody knows it's in Missouri.
If
you travel somewhere else and you tell people you're from Kansas City, they go, "Oh, Kansas." Yeah, you're not totally wrong, but not quite. So there's that too.
So let us know what you think. Obviously, being as close to St. Louis as we are, have a lot of friends from St. Louis and that currently live in St. Louis. So let us know what you think on our hot take of St. Louis is the better city in Missouri, the better larger city in Missouri.
Yep. Tell us where we're wrong. And of course, if you have other ideas for hot takes, if you have a hot take about Kansas City or a spot that you've been that you think is really cool that we should highlight, tell people to check out, let us know what those are. We would love to do that. And thanks for being with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.